It was a Tuesday evening when the first real alarm bell went off in my head. Sophie was almost clockwork about getting home, usually around 6:30 p.m., but when 8 o'clock rolled around and the driveway was still empty, I felt that uneasy shift from patience to concern. My phone stayed silent. No call. No text. Just a quiet that felt heavier by the minute. Dinner was already on the table. I'd made chicken parmesan, her favorite, the kind she always bragged about to friends. The candles I'd lit earlier had burned down to waxy nubs, and the food had gone cold. Our anniversary dinner sat there untouched, like it had been forgotten on purpose. 11 years of marriage, and I was celebrating it alone. By the third time I called her cell phone, I already knew how it would end. Straight to voicemail again. That tight feeling in my gut pulled harder, slowly morphing from mild worry into something sharper, something instinctive. Outside, the windows reflected full darkness as night settled in, and inside, the house felt too big for just one person. At exactly 9:17 p.m., my phone finally buzzed. Working late with caller. Don't wait up. 6 words. Short. Polite. Ordinary on the surface. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about a message like that. But after 11 years of marriage, you learn to trust your instincts. Something about those words felt empty, rehearsed, like they'd been typed because they had to be, not because they were true. Even the timing bothered me. Who sends a working late text nearly 3 hours after they were supposed to be home? And on our anniversary of all nights? I set my phone down on the kitchen counter and looked at the plate in front of me. I'd picked at the food without realizing it, the chicken now cold and stiff, the sauce thick and lifeless. The bottle of wine sat open but barely touched, doing nothing but filling the room with the faint smell of wasted effort. My name is Lucas Hayes. I'm 38 years old, and I work as a financial analyst at Hammond & Pierce in Chicago. Patterns are my profession. I find them, dissect them, and figure out what they're trying to tell me. My coworkers like to joke that I can smell a financial irregularity from a mile away. The human calculator, they call me, never to my face, of course. Last year, I was promoted to senior analyst. The raise was generous. The hours were not. The new corner office overlooking Michigan Avenue came with longer days and later nights, something Sophie complained about at first, then slowly stopped mentioning altogether. And lately, the patterns in my marriage had changed. Not dramatically. Not loudly. But consistently. Too consistently to ignore. Too orderly to be accidental. The late nights on her end had started about 7 months earlier and kept stacking up. Our deep conversations faded, replaced by quick check-ins about groceries, bills, and schedules. The spontaneous weekend trips to Michigan's wine country vanished, substituted with her girls' retreats, trips that somehow never produced a single photo, despite Sophie once documenting everything we did together. Then there were the phone calls. The ones she took outside on the back patio. She'd lower her voice and laugh in a way I hadn't heard in a long time, bright, musical laughter that used to belong to me, now clearly meant for someone else. When she came back inside with flushed cheeks, she'd blame it on a funny story about a client. I never pressed. Maybe I should have. From the outside, our life looked solid. We lived in Evanston, in a 4-bedroom Victorian that had once stretched our budget thin but now sat comfortably within reach thanks to both our careers. Last year's kitchen renovation had even landed us a feature in a local home magazine, Sophie's proudest achievement. We didn't have kids. We tried for 3 long, painful years. 2 miscarriages eventually drained the hope out of the process, and we accepted our childless life with something that felt like mutual relief. The second loss nearly broke us, but we learned how to step carefully around the cracks it left behind. Friends envied us. 2 incomes. Freedom. A life that looked simple and stress-free. The perfect couple, they called us at dinner parties and block barbecues. Owen and Clara from across the street even asked us to give a speech at their wedding last summer, like we held some secret blueprint for success. But nothing is ever what it looks like from the outside. Behind closed doors, our conversations grew shorter. Our Sunday brunches on the patio quietly disappeared. When intimacy happened at all, it felt mechanical. The space between us and our king-sized bed stretched from inches into what felt like miles of cold Egyptian cotton. That night, lying alone and listening to the occasional car pass outside, something came back to me, something I'd set up years earlier and nearly forgotten. Early in our marriage, when we merged our digital lives, I'd created a shared cloud storage account. I was the admin, full synchronization. All devices connected. Back then, it was just practical. A clean, efficient system for a clean, efficient couple. Organization had been one of the things that drew us together at that charity fundraiser where we met. Her administrative precision balanced my analytical mindset perfectly. I got out of bed and walked into my home office. The laptop's blue glow filled the room as I logged in and navigated to our shared cloud. 3 clicks. That's all it took. I was staring at the automatic backup of her text messages. My heart slammed against my ribs as I clicked through folders, part of me still hoping I was wrong, that this was all paranoia, just the natural drift of a long marriage. But another part of me already knew. The human calculator had finished the math. What I saw froze my blood. Missing you already. Can't wait to see you. Ryan Carter. 10:42 p.m. Ryan Carter, her boss at the marketing firm where she'd worked for 5 years. The same man who had sat at our dinner table with his wife Tessa, making polite small talk while stealing glances at my wife. The man who shook my hand firmly, looked me straight in the eyes, and complimented my barbecue skills like we were friends. The man who praised our home renovation while standing in the very living room he was helping to destroy. He was the same guy who once got a little too drunk and unloaded his worries on me about running a marketing department during an economic slump, talking like we were brothers in arms in the trenches of corporate America. I kept scrolling. Weeks turned into months of messages, each exchange more graphic, more intimate, more damning than the last. There were hotel bookings at the Waldorf downtown. Photos she'd never sent me, images meant only for him. And long conversations about a future together on the West Coast, far away from Chicago. Can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore, she had written. Just a little longer, he replied. Then you'll finally have the life you deserve. That's when it became clear this wasn't just an affair. This wasn't sneaking around for excitement. They were building something. Planning an escape. And I wasn't part of the plan. They talked openly about real estate prices in San Diego, about timelines, about money, about how much they could expect once everything was liquidated. Our money. Our shared assets. Still, I didn't slam the laptop shut. I didn't punch a wall or throw a glass like some overacted scene from a daytime soap. Instead, I did what I've always done best. I opened a blank spreadsheet and started creating columns. Date. Time. Message content. Location. Expenses. Then I began documenting everything with surgical precision, a strange calm settling over me like icy water. The analyst took over when the husband in me wanted to scream into the hollow space of our house. 3 hours later, I had the foundation of a complete record of their betrayal, organized, indexed, cross-referenced. Useful. You see, I'm not a man who spirals out of control. I'm the kind who tightens his grip. Sophie came home the next morning at 7:30 a.m. Her hair was still damp, clearly washed somewhere else. Even her scent was wrong. Not the Chanel No. 5 I'd given her for our anniversary, but something newer, sharper, unfamiliar. She stopped short when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table, already dressed for work, coffee in hand. Charcoal suit. Navy tie. You're up early, she said, setting down her overnight bag, the small Louis Vuitton weekender I'd bought her for her birthday 2 years earlier. Her voice had that forced cheerfulness people use when they're hiding something big. Didn't sleep much, I said evenly, sliding a mug across the marble counter toward her. Made you breakfast. Avocado toast, just how you like it. Perfectly toasted bread. Avocado sliced, not mashed. Red pepper flakes measured just right. Details have always mattered to me. She looked confused. I hadn't made her breakfast in months. Truthfully, neither of us had done those small, everyday kindnesses in a long time. That kind of intimacy had quietly died somewhere along the way. She hesitated before sitting, like she was unsure whether this was a gesture or a setup. "Thanks," she said carefully, lifting the cup. Her wedding ring caught the morning light, 3-carat emerald cut on a white gold band. An indulgence we couldn't afford when I proposed, but one I saved for anyway, 18 months of discipline for that single moment. "About last night," she started. "Big deadline," I cut in gently, my tone calm, understanding. "I get it. Ryan's always intense during campaign season. Especially with next-level pitches." Relief washed over her face. She thought I was still clueless. Still trusting. Her shoulders loosened. "Exactly. We're pitching to next-level tech next week. Everything has to be flawless." The whole team was there until midnight. The lie came out so smoothly it made me wonder how many times I'd swallowed similar stories before. How many evenings I'd nodded along while she refined her second life. The ease of it was almost admirable. Creative director, indeed. "That sounds exhausting," I said, watching her closely as she avoided holding my gaze. "Most people miss the small tells." "I don't." The tightening around her eyes. The slight flare of her nostrils. The increased blinking. "It is," she sighed, settling comfortably into the role. "But if we land this, it could mean a major promotion. Next Level's expanding in Chicago, and they want a team that really understands the local market." "For both of you?" I asked casually, stirring my coffee even though it didn't need it. "You and Ryan, I mean." She paused barely a fraction of a second too long. Her hands gripped the mug a little tighter. Small habits I hadn't noticed before now seemed telling. "For the team," she corrected smoothly. "Everyone benefits from a win this big." I smiled, stood, and reached for my briefcase. Real leather. A gift from her parents when I made senior analyst. "Well, I believe in you," I said. "Always have." I kissed her cheek. She stiffened just slightly. Her skin smelled like unfamiliar soap, something with sandalwood notes we didn't own. "Dinner tonight?" I asked. "I can grab takeout. Salvatore still makes that mushroom risotto you love." She looked unsettled by the attention. "Sure. That sounds nice. Around 7? 7 it is," I said, heading for the door. "Have a good day, sweetheart. Hope the next level prep goes smoothly." As I drove to work in my leased BMW, I began assembling my plan. Not one fueled by jealousy or rage, but by calculation. 15 years in financial analysis had taught me one unshakable truth: information is power. And before making any move, I needed all of it. Acting on incomplete data is how disasters happen. My father, a corporate attorney before retirement, drilled that lesson into me early and often. That evening, I came home with pasta from Salvatore's, her favorite Barolo we discovered on our honeymoon in Italy, and a bouquet of flowers. When I handed Sophie the bouquet of lilies, she didn't smile right away. She studied them instead, like they were evidence. Lilies had always been her favorite, something I hadn't acknowledged in at least 2 years. The last time I'd bought her flowers was after we lost the second baby. "What's all this for?" she asked, brushing her fingers over the white petals arranged in the crystal vase I'd chosen. I shrugged, keeping my posture relaxed as I laid out our best plates, the Wedgwood set her mother had given us. "Do I need an excuse to do something nice for my wife? Think of it as a rain check for our anniversary dinner." She went completely still for a split second before forcing herself to recover. She had forgotten. Our anniversary had slipped her mind entirely. "Lucas, I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "Work's been insane and I completely." "It's fine," I cut in gently, keeping my voice light. "We'll celebrate tonight instead. No harm done." She watched me closely as she twirled pasta around her fork, the silver catching the glow of the candles. "You've been different lately." "Different how?" I asked, taking a sip of wine and observing her over the rim of the glass. The Barolo was exceptional, cherry up front, leather and tobacco on the finish. I don't know, she said slowly. More attentive. Less distracted. She paused, then added, more like you used to be. I reached across the table and took her hand. The same hand that had been on another man's body just hours earlier. The same one that had typed the messages I'd read. I kept my face neutral, even affectionate, as my thumb traced her knuckles and brushed against her wedding ring. The ring now felt less like a symbol and more like a costume piece. Maybe I just remembered how to value what I already have. Something flickered in her eyes, guilt, maybe, but it vanished quickly, replaced by a calculating look I didn't remember seeing before. Or maybe I just hadn't noticed it until now. Well, I like it, she said, giving my hand a squeeze before pulling away. It reminds me of when we first started dating. Door County, she added. That weekend trip. I nodded. Of course I remembered. 3 days in a lakeside cabin, barely leaving the bedroom except to watch sunsets from the porch. How could I forget? I said. You wore that blue sundress that drove me crazy. She smiled, genuinely this time, and for a brief moment the past felt close enough to touch. And you nearly burned the place down trying to cook fresh fish. The smoke detector was overly sensitive, I shot back with a laugh. For a heartbeat, we were us again. Then her phone vibrated on the counter. She didn't pick it up, but her eyes snapped toward it anyway. Just like that, the moment shattered and reality rushed back in. We finished dinner talking about nothing important. That night, she said she was too exhausted for intimacy. I told her I understood. Later, as she slept beside me, her breathing slow and steady, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, refining my plan. My father always said revenge was best served cold. I planned to serve it frozen. Over the next 2 weeks, I played my role perfectly, the caring, oblivious husband, while I continued digging. That's when I discovered Ryan had been expensing their affair through the company. Hotel stays labeled as client meetings. Dinners charged as business development. The Waldorf alone ran over $500 a night. Meals at Alinea and ever topped $1,000 with wine pairings. He wasn't just cheating. He was stealing. The nerve of it almost made me laugh. He was using corporate money to fund the collapse of both our marriages, charging their romantic escapes to the company while pretending to be a responsible executive. Working in finance came with advantages. Hammond and Pierce occasionally consulted for smaller firms, including Sophie's, under the pretense of system audits and upgrades. That connection gave me temporary access to their accounting software. What I uncovered was far worse than I expected. Ryan had been mismanaging company funds for years, redirecting them into accounts under his control. And Sophie's name appeared on some of the paperwork. Whether she knew what she was signing or not didn't matter. Her approval was there. Black and white. Fraudulent invoices. Altered records. To someone without training, it might have looked normal. To me, it was unmistakable. That changed everything. This was no longer just about betrayal. It was about criminal exposure. The situation had escalated, and so had my response. The analyst in me recognized a shift in the entire equation. At home, I kept up appearances. Sunday breakfasts in bed. Belgian waffles 1 week. Eggs Benedict the next. Surprise lunches at her office, where I shook Ryan's hand and exchanged polite small talk while watching him closely. The damp sheen on his upper lip. The overly firm grip. The way his eyes never fully met mine when he mentioned our anniversary. Every night, I updated my spreadsheet. New entries. New correlations. A growing body of evidence that couldn't be brushed off as coincidence. Then I made an anonymous call to the company's compliance hotline. I altered my voice. Dropped specific account numbers. Shared just enough detail to trigger an internal audit. Then I hung up before the conversation could go any further. The seed was planted. The reaction was almost immediate. That Thursday evening, Sophie came home looking pale and shaken. Her makeup, usually flawless, did little to hide the tension etched around her eyes. Her Burberry trench coat was fastened wrong, buttons misaligned, belt uneven. A tiny detail, but completely out of character for Sophie. I noticed it instantly. It told me everything I needed to know. Rough day at work? I asked, putting concern into my voice as I handed her a glass of wine. Marlowe. Her favorite. From that small Napa vineyard we'd visited 3 summers earlier. She took a deep swallow before answering, leaving a bright red lipstick print on the rim. There's some kind of internal review going on, she said. Accounting issues, or something like that. Everyone's tense. They brought in outside auditors today without any warning. Including Ryan? I asked lightly, stirring the risotto simmering on the stove. The wooden spoon glided through the rice in slow, steady circles. The motion steadied me. Her eyes jumped to mine. Why are you asking about Ryan specifically? I shrugged and poured in another ladle of broth. He runs the department, right? That kind of thing usually lands on the boss's shoulders. I imagine it's weighing on him. Yeah, she said after a pause. He's worried. The CFO pulled him into a closed-door meeting this afternoon. 4 hours? I said. That sounds serious. Corporate investigations usually get ugly. I let the silence stretch before adding, remember when Hammond and Pierce caught that junior analyst trading on insider info? Total fallout. Entire teams were affected. The color drained from her face. She set her wine down carefully, her hand trembling just enough to notice. I'm sure it's nothing like that, she said quickly. Probably just a routine compliance check. That night, Ryan sent her 17 text messages. I know because I counted them in our shared cloud backup. The messages were full of urgency. They discussed backup plans and finances. Another urged accelerating the timeline and getting out before everything collapsed. One line stuck with me in particular, they're looking at the next level documentation. I read every message slowly and added each one to my growing spreadsheet. My hands were steady. My breathing calm. By then, emotion had burned off completely. All that remained was analysis. The texts confirmed what I already suspected. The affair and the financial misconduct weren't separate problems, they were intertwined, feeding off each other. A closed loop of deception. It was time to move into phase 2. Finding Tessa Carter turned out to be easy. She had a visible presence online, interior design business, charity boards, fitness class check-ins at an upscale health club. A curated life. I drafted a carefully worded message suggesting we meet to discuss something of mutual importance. I attached just enough proof to demand her attention, one screenshot of a text, a hotel receipt, but not enough to reveal how deep my knowledge went. Enough to compel her. Not enough to give her time to prepare. We met at a coffee shop in Bucktown, far from either of our neighborhoods. Neutral ground. Low risk of running into familiar faces. She looked exactly as I remembered from our dinner parties, composed, stylish, and sharp-eyed. Her blonde hair was pulled into a tight bun. Her makeup was minimal, deliberate. She wore a wedding ring identical to the one on Ryan's hand, a symbol of a vow he had thoroughly dismantled. The Prada bag. The tailored Armani suit. She projected control and success, even as her world teetered on collapse. I almost didn't come, she said, sitting down across from me. No small talk. No warm-up. Her voice was calm, cultured, with just a hint of the Minnesota accent she'd mostly erased. I'm glad you did, I replied, sliding a cup of coffee toward her. Black. No sugar. I remembered her preference from past dinners. The same attention to detail that had built my career now served a more personal campaign. How long have you known? She asked. Her hands rested neatly on the table. Not a tremor. Tessa Carter was not fragile. 2 months for certain, I said. Longer than that if I'm being honest. The pattern became undeniable around Valentine's Day. Sophie said she was at a marketing conference in Milwaukee. Tessa nodded slowly. There was no conference. Ryan told me he was in Detroit meeting clients. She took a sip, leaving a perfect lipstick mark on the porcelain. And you're telling me this because, she asked. Because you deserve the truth, I said. And because this has escalated beyond an affair. There's financial exposure. Legal exposure. That finally cracked her composure. Just slightly. Explain. I slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed expense reports, hotel invoices, and selected text exchanges. Everything was organized, tabbed, and highlighted for clarity. Your husband has been using company funds to pay for their relationship, I said. And it doesn't stop there. I continued. There's a pattern of embezzlement. Fake vendors. Inflated expenses. Possibly offshore accounts. I've traced at least $300,000 over the past 3 years. She flipped through the pages, her jaw tightening with each one. When she looked up, there were no tears, only cold, focused fury. I thought he was just working late, she said bitterly. Building something for us. I defended him when my friends questioned it. She laughed quietly. I told them we were a team. That our life was the result of his dedication. She looked at me. What an idiot I've been. I understand, I said softly. Sophie told me the same things. That the late nights were about our future. That the trips were about security. And in that moment, across a small table in a quiet cafe, we both realized how thoroughly we'd been played. Tessa closed the folder and rested her perfectly manicured hands on top of it. Her French manicure caught the overhead lights, pristine and controlled. So what do you want, Lucas? She asked calmly. Revenge? Money? Why not just take this straight to the police? Justice, I said without hesitation. And a clean break. I paused, then added, going directly to law enforcement too early limits control. I want to make sure both of us are protected from collateral damage. That takes timing. And complete evidence. By the time our coffee cups were empty, an unspoken agreement had formed. Tessa had access I didn't to financial documents, personal records, passwords. Information that could close gaps in my case. She promised to gather what she could and get it to me within a week. When we stood to leave, she clasped my hand firmly. Her diamond tennis bracelet flashed as she leaned in. They thought we were fools, she said quietly, her blue eyes locking onto mine. Let's show them how wrong they were. I'll be in touch within 48 hours, she added. 5 days later, an encrypted email arrived. The contents were devastating. Bank statements. Transfer logs. Offshore account numbers in the Caymans and Belize. And Sophie far more deeply involved than I had initially believed. She repeatedly approved questionable documents. There were emails where she discussed moving money and covering tracks. In one exchange, she suggested altering a quarterly report to obscure a suspicious transfer flagged by Fiona in accounting. Another laid out her idea for creating a shell company to route marketing contracts through, skimming kickbacks into offshore accounts. My wife wasn't just having an affair. She was involved in serious financial misconduct. The irony was almost unbearable. Sophie had once claimed honesty was her highest value. She'd ended friendships over perceived lies. 5 years earlier, she'd nearly divorced me when I failed to disclose a brief gambling issue that cost us $5,000. That moment had been my reckoning. I recommitted to the marriage. To full transparency. Apparently, Sophie had drawn very different lessons from the same crisis. I took everything to a white-collar criminal attorney. Victor Hale had handled several high-profile embezzlement cases and came highly recommended by a colleague who had survived his own very public divorce. After reviewing the evidence for 3 hours in his downtown office, he leaned back behind his mahogany desk and looked at me gravely. "You understand this will end her career," he said. "And there's a real chance she goes to prison." His tone was neutral. Informational. Not judgmental. "I understand," I replied evenly. The fact that it didn't disturb me more was something I noted but didn't dwell on. I had passed beyond anger into clarity. The woman you married may not survive this, he continued. And your own reputation could take damage by association. These cases tend to create fallout, even for innocent spouses. I've prepared for that, I said. My firm already knows. I had quietly informed my direct supervisor weeks earlier, ensuring transparency before rumors could spread. Hammond and Pierce valued my work enough to absorb minimal PR risk. Hale studied me, tapping a Montblanc pen against his legal pad. Most people just want a divorce, he said. Maybe alimony. This is meticulous. I'm meticulous by nature, I replied. It's why I'm good at what I do. When betrayal crosses into criminal territory, half measures don't make sense. That weekend, Sophie announced she needed to leave town for an emergency business trip. Ryan had apparently called an all-hands strategy retreat in Michigan to respond to the audit. The Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island. A luxury property closed to regular guests for their corporate event. I wished her luck. Helped her pack. Suggested comfortable clothes for long sessions. Even helped her choose jewelry for the formal dinner listed on the itinerary she showed me. An itinerary I already knew was fake. The performance continued. The loyal husband. The devoted executive. Neither of us acknowledging the widening fault line beneath our marriage. While she was gone, I moved quietly. I emptied our joint accounts, leaving just enough to avoid immediate suspicion. I transferred our investments into accounts solely in my name. I filed for divorce under irreconcilable differences and had the paperwork ready. I changed passwords. Froze shared credit cards. Contacted a realtor about listing the house. Piece by piece, I dismantled the financial framework of our marriage, the same way she had dismantled its emotional core. Each transaction removed another brick from the structure we'd built over 11 years. But the real turning point came Monday morning. Ryan was escorted out of his office by security. 2 police officers followed close behind. The audit had uncovered enough evidence to pursue charges. The criminal investigation moved faster than I expected, fueled by documentation Tessa had delivered directly to the CFO. By that afternoon, Sophie was summoned back from the retreat for questioning. Their Mackinac Island escape ended abruptly, paradise punctured by reality. She called me, panicked. Lucas, she gasped. Something's wrong. Ryan's been arrested. The police want to talk to me. I don't understand what's happening. Her voice was high, unsteady, unraveling. The confident marketing executive was gone. In her place was a frightened woman facing consequences, possibly for the first time in her life. Where are you right now? I asked, keeping my voice even, giving away none of the grim satisfaction I felt hearing the fear in hers. I leaned back in my office chair and looked out over the Chicago skyline through the floor-to-ceiling window. The city moved on as usual, cars, people, deadlines, completely indifferent to the collapse of my marriage. I'm at the police station, she said. They're letting me make one call before questioning. Her voice cracked. Lucas, I'm scared. Stay calm, I said. Tell them you want a lawyer before answering anything. That's your right. The words came out flat, professional, like advice from a handbook. But I haven't done anything wrong, she insisted, panic creeping higher into her voice. If I hadn't seen the evidence myself, I might have believed her. Sophie had always been convincing. It was one of the reasons she was so good at her job. This has to be a mistake, she continued. They're talking about fraud. Financial irregularities. I'm in marketing, not accounting. There was a pause. A moment where I could have told her everything. Where I could have released years of trust, pain, and betrayal all at once. Where I could have recited the evidence line by line and watched the truth crush her. Instead, I said only, then you have nothing to worry about. When she came home that night, released on her own recognizance pending further investigation, she walked into a carefully staged reality. I was seated at the dining room table. In front of me, arranged with deliberate precision, were the divorce papers. Beside them sat printed copies of her text messages with Ryan, hotel invoices, and bank statements tracing the money trail. A complete archive of betrayal. The lighting was intentional. The chandelier dimmed. A table lamp angled just right to illuminate the documents like an exhibit. She stopped cold. "You knew," she said. It wasn't a question. "I knew," I confirmed calmly. "How long?" She stayed near the doorway, coat still on, as if stepping farther inside would make it real. "Long enough," I said. "Long enough to document everything. Long enough to make sure you and Ryan answer for every choice you made. Every lie. Every stolen dollar. Every promise broken." Her knees gave out, and she collapsed into a chair. Her designer handbag slipped from her grasp and hit the floor. She didn't notice. Her coat hung open, forgotten. "It's not what you think," she rushed out. "Ryan manipulated me. He threatened my career. Said he'd destroy me if I didn't help." The words came too fast. Too polished. A defense rehearsed in advance. "That's the story you're going with?" I asked, genuinely curious. "That you were coerced into an affair and financial fraud?" I slid a few pages closer to her. "Because the messages tell a different story. Can't wait until we start our new life once this blows over. Should we look at Coronado or La Jolla? The Cayman account crossed 7 figures today. That doesn't sound like someone acting under duress." She looked shaken, wiping tears from her eyes as she tried to regain composure. "What do you want from me?" she sobbed. "Money? To humiliate me? What will make this stop?" "Nothing," I said honestly. "I don't want anything from you anymore." I gestured to the papers. "The divorce documents are there. Your things need to be packed and out by the end of the week. The house will be sold. Any proceeds after the mortgage will go toward your legal fees. You're going to need them." I paused. Victor Hale isn't cheap, but he's the best white-collar defense attorney in Chicago. Her head snapped up. "How do you?" "I scheduled a consultation for you tomorrow morning," I said. She stared at me, stunned. "How can you be this cold?" she whispered. "After 11 years? After everything we survived? The miscarriages. Your gambling problem. My father dying. How can you just erase me?" "The same way you erased the truth," I said quietly. "The same way you planned to leave me while sleeping beside me. The same way you put us both at legal risk by committing fraud tied to our joint assets." I leaned forward slightly. "We all discover things about ourselves under pressure. You learned you were capable of betrayal. And I learned I was capable of strategy." "You're ruining my life," she whispered, gripping the table as her hands shook. "No, Sophie," I said evenly. "You did that. I'm just making sure you don't take mine down with you. Sign the papers. They're generous, given the circumstances. You keep your personal belongings, your car, and enough to retain counsel. That's more than fair." 2 days later, someone unexpected showed up at my door. Isla, Sophie's closest friend, stood on the porch, visibly uncomfortable. Her usual bright energy was gone, replaced by muted clothes and a tight expression. "Can we talk?" she asked, shifting nervously. I let her in, curious. Isla and I had never been close. She was Sophie's ally, not mine. But I'd always been courteous. The perfect husband, as far as she knew. She perched stiffly on the edge of the couch, my couch now. Her gaze drifted around the room, taking in the packed boxes, the empty shelves where Sophie's decorative touches had been removed. "I know Sophie did terrible things," she said carefully. "Which ones?" I asked. "The affair or the financial crimes?" She flinched. "All of it. But there's something you need to know. Something that could affect the legal case." I said nothing. Silence filled the room. Thick. Uncomfortable. Silence has a way of making people uncomfortable if you give it room. Most of the time, they fill it with more truth than they plan to share. They were going to take everything, Isla finally said. She exhaled sharply, as if admitting it hurt. Once Ryan got his promotion next month, they planned to drain your accounts and disappear. They had it mapped out. She swallowed. Sophie had already started packing up anything she could sell without you noticing. Jewelry. Collectibles. Even that first edition Hemingway your grandfather left you. I took that in without reacting. Detached. Almost clinical. The Hemingway was safe, tucked away in my office desk drawer. I'd moved it weeks earlier, right after my suspicions began to solidify. And you're telling me this now because... I prompted. Isla looked down, her fingers twisting together in her lap. Because I helped her. I let her store things at my place. She shook her head. I listened to their plans and didn't stop them. I even helped her research countries without extradition treaties. I thought it was some marketing project at first. Her voice cracked. Now Ryan's arrested. Sophie is facing charges. And I finally understand how far this went. How completely I was played. Are you worried about being charged as an accessory? I asked. It was a reasonable question, given what she'd just admitted. No, she said after a moment, lifting her eyes to meet mine. I'm worried about being a bad person. She took a breath. I've known you for 10 years, Lucas. You didn't deserve this. Neither did Tessa, she added. Neither of you deserves to be tossed aside like outdated appliances while they built a new life with your money. The question slipped out before I could stop it. Did she ever say why? Part of me didn't care anymore. Another part, the analytical one, needed the answer to finish the equation. To understand whether this had been personal or simply convenient. Isla hesitated. She said you'd grown apart. That you cared more about spreadsheets than about her. That the passion was gone. She fiddled with her silver bracelet. But honestly? I think it was the lifestyle. Ryan promised her excitement. Travel. A life that felt glamorous instead of steady. Villas in Europe. Yachts in the Mediterranean. She paused. After the second miscarriage, she said something shifted in her. That life felt too short to be merely comfortable when she could be extraordinary. I nodded slowly. The final piece slid into place. Thank you for telling me the truth, I said. What Isla didn't know, at least not until afterward, was that I recorded the entire conversation with her knowledge and consent. It became yet another piece of evidence. Another nail sealing the fate of a plan that was never going to work. As she stood to leave, she stopped at the door. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I always thought you were good for her. Stable. Reliable. The kind of man most women would appreciate. Apparently stable became boring, I replied evenly. Predictable, too. I gave a faint shrug. Still, valuable lessons. The company filed formal embezzlement charges soon after. The total came to just under $300,000, spread across 3 years, multiple clients, and several projects. The district attorney added fraud and conspiracy charges. Tessa filed for divorce and handed over additional evidence against Ryan, including unauthorized transfers from their joint accounts. Once the system started moving, it didn't slow down. Statements were collected. Evidence catalogued. Charges finalized. Sophie was arrested the following week. The police picked her up at the extended stay hotel where she'd been living since leaving our house. When she called me from the detention center, I answered not out of obligation, but curiosity. Maybe I needed to hear her voice one last time to confirm that the woman I loved no longer existed. You won, she said flatly. Are you happy now? Did you get your revenge? This isn't about winning, I said. Then what is it? She snapped. Punishment? Making me suffer because I bruised your ego? Consequences, I replied simply. You and Ryan lived like consequences didn't apply to you. Like the rules everyone else follows were optional. This isn't vengeance, Sophie. It's accountability. There was a long pause. We had something real once, she said quietly. You and me. Remember Maine? The lighthouse at sunrise? The way you held me after I lost the baby? Her voice cracked. That was real, Lucas. No matter what came later. It was real, I agreed. Until you decided it wasn't. Until you decided our life together wasn't enough. Until you chose betrayal, not just of me, but of yourself. The woman I married wouldn't recognize who you've become. Silence settled between us, heavy with words that would never be spoken. Apologies that would never come. Explanations that would never be enough. I have to go, she said finally. My lawyer's here. Goodbye, Sophie. I ended the call and felt something unexpected, not pain, not anger, but closure. Like a door clicking shut for good. Later, sitting alone in the living room, my living room, I realized her presence was gone. No ghost. No weight. Just space. The house already felt different. Cleaner. As if something toxic had finally been removed. The legal process dragged on for months. I testified when needed. Supplied documents when asked. Otherwise, I focused on rebuilding. I sold the house for a modest profit and moved into a waterfront apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Clean lines. No memories embedded in the walls. I left Hammond and Pierce and began consulting companies on financial security and fraud prevention. Ironically, what nearly destroyed my life became my greatest professional asset. My fees were high. My client list was selective. And for the first time in a long while, my future felt entirely my own. Out of what had nearly destroyed me personally, I built something solid professionally. What started as a catastrophe slowly transformed into a career advantage. Companies began seeking me out specifically because I understood how smart, well-educated professionals hide financial wrongdoing and how to uncover it. My worst experience became my strongest qualification. Ryan was sentenced to 6 years in prison for embezzlement, fraud, and multiple financial crimes. The judge didn't soften his words. Ryan's senior position and the calculated, long-term nature of his actions worked against him. Betrayal of trust, especially at that level, doesn't earn leniency. Sophie tried to frame herself as a pawn, an unwilling participant swept along by someone more powerful. The court didn't buy it. She received 3 years. During sentencing, the judge cited her text messages directly, messages where she discussed hiding money, falsifying documents, and manipulating reports. These are not the actions of someone under duress, he said plainly. They are deliberate choices made by a willing participant. Your effort to shift blame only reinforces your refusal to accept responsibility. I attended the hearing and sat quietly in the back row. Sophie glanced over her shoulder once. Her eyes held anger, fear, and something close to despair. I met her look without expression, no satisfaction, no apology. At that point, we were no longer husband and wife. We were barely even acquaintances. Just two people tied together by a legal process that was finally cutting the last threads between us. She looked smaller than I remembered. Stripped of confidence. The polished executive replaced by someone confronting the full weight of her decisions. 6 months later, I bought a sailboat. 32 feet of smooth fiberglass and polished wood. I named it New Balance. It felt appropriate, a vessel built for quiet reflection, with room for company when I wanted it. On calm evenings, I'd take it out onto Lake Michigan and watch the sun dip behind the Chicago skyline, painting the city in shades of gold and deep red. The water rocked gently beneath me. The wind filled the sails and cleared my head in a way nothing else could. Sometimes Tessa came along. What we shared wasn't romantic. It didn't need to be. We'd survived the same storm, and every now and then, it helped to sit beside someone who understood exactly what that meant. Her interior design business was thriving. Once she redirected the energy she'd spent holding together a broken marriage, her career took off. One evening, as we drifted near the harbor and city lights flickered on one by one, she asked something I hadn't really considered. "Do you ever regret how far you took it?" she asked. "You could have divorced her and walked away. Kept your dignity. Avoided all the legal fallout." I let the boat rock gently as I thought it through. They weren't just betraying us emotionally, I said at last. They were stealing. Lying. Breaking laws and vows like they didn't matter. I shook my head. Walking away would have meant agreeing with them that consequences were optional. That rules don't apply to people who think they're special. She nodded slowly. "My sister thinks I should have just taken the settlement," Tessa said. "She says pursuing justice made me look vindictive." "Forgiveness is personal," I replied. "It doesn't cancel accountability. You can forgive someone and still hold them responsible. Those things don't contradict each other." We watched the final strip of sunlight disappear, leaving the lake wrapped in quiet blue twilight. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel regretful either. What I felt was certainty that I hadn't allowed myself to become a victim in someone else's story. I had taken my life back from the people who nearly reduced it to collateral damage. As time passed, I started dating again. Carefully at first. Then more confidently. I wasn't bitter. I was selective. Honesty mattered more to me than charm. Transparency more than grand gestures. The women I dated noticed my directness, how clear I was about expectations. The experience had burned away any tolerance I once had for games or half-truths. Occasionally, I'd hear updates about Sophie through mutual acquaintances. She was serving her sentence in a minimum security facility in Kentucky. She joined an education program, teaching marketing skills to other inmates. She'd written apology letters to former colleagues whose careers were damaged by the scandal. Whether those gestures came from remorse or strategy, I couldn't say. And honestly, it no longer mattered. Her life was hers. Mine was mine. The paths that had once been so tightly intertwined now ran in completely different directions. On the anniversary of our divorce, a letter arrived. I recognized her handwriting instantly, the same careful curves that once filled birthday cards and love notes. The Kentucky postmark confirmed what I already knew. I held the envelope for a long time before opening it. The past reaching forward, asking to be acknowledged. Curiosity won. Inside was a single handwritten page. "Lucas," it began. "I know you have no reason to read this, let alone believe me. But I finally understand what I lost, not just my freedom or my career, but the life we built. The trust we shared. The foundation that could have carried us through anything if I hadn't been blinded by what I thought I wanted. The grass I chased wasn't greener. It was artificial. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I only wanted you to know you were right about consequences. They're unavoidable. And they should be." It was signed simply, Sophie. No last name. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not displayed, not destroyed. Just filed away. An artifact from a life I no longer lived. A chapter closed. A lesson archived. Life moves forward. Always forward. And so do I. If you like this story, click the hype button. This video deserves to be popular. Have a great rest of your day.